Alright, today we are talking about rectangles. We want to recognize and apply the properties of rectangles. So a definition of a rectangle is a parallelogram that has 4 right angles. And these are some of the properties. So we have all 4 right angles. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Diagonals bisect each other. And then another one that is important for rectangles is that the diagonals are congruent. So the diagonals are going to be the same length on there. Alright, so for our first example, it says a rectangular garden gate is reinforced with diagonal braces to prevent it from sagging. If JK is equal to 12, so I'm going to go over here and label that. And LN is 6.5, so that's right here. Find KM. So KM is all the way across here. So based on what we have, I know I'm going to use my properties with my diagonals here. I'm going to be using these two. So the diagonals bisect each other, which means it cuts them in half, and the diagonals are congruent. So if this is 6.5, then this half over here is also 6.5. So if I add that together, that gives me a whole length of 13 for JL. And since JL is congruent to KM, that means that KM is also 13 feet. So we use the fact that these bisect each other, so those have to be equal, these little pieces, and the fact that this diagonal is equal to that diagonal. Alright, example 2. Quadrilateral RSTU is a rectangle. If the measure of RTU, so RTU would be right here, and then SUR, so that would be right here. Find the value of X. So as you can see here, sorry I didn't have that in there. As you can see, here's my first angle, here's my second angle. You can tell by looking at those that those are not equal to each other. But this angle right here would be equal to this angle up here. And vice versa with this one would be equal to this one right here. So if I say that this is a rectangle, then it has 4 right angles. So these two angles added together has to equal 90 degrees. So I have 8x plus 4 plus 3x minus 2 has to equal 90. And then I would subtract 2 from both sides. Divide by 11. And I'm going to get x equals 8. Go back and reread what they're asking for. They're asking us just to find x. So I would have x equals 8 there. It's because a rectangle always has 4 right angles in there. That's the property we used. Alright, example 3 is talking about artists. They stretch their own canvases over wooden frames. So they're making their own frame and then using the canvas to stretch over so that they have that to paint on then. This allows them to customize the size of their canvas in order to ensure that the frame is rectangular. Before stretching the canvas, an artist measures the sides of the diagonals of the frame. So we have AB, which was 12. We have BC, which is 35. We have CD, which is 12. DA is 35. BD is 37, and AC is 37. So we'll label those inside of there. Explain how the artist can use this to be sure that the frame is rectangular. So first we're going to say that since opposite sides, sides are going to abbreviate. Opposite sides are congruent. Then it is a parallelogram. So there's my little parallelogram symbol. So then if it's a parallelogram and we want to determine if it's a rectangle, we're going to check the diagonals. So since the diagonals are equal, So then we can say it's a rectangle. So the fact that the opposite sides were congruent tells us that it's a parallelogram. And then the fact that the diagonals are congruent tells us it's a specific parallelogram that's actually a rectangle. All right, last example. Quadrilateral JKLM has these vertices. Determine whether it is a rectangle by using the distance formula. So the first thing I'm going to do is sketch this out. So -2, 3. Okay, so it looks kind of rectangular. My drawing isn't necessarily perfect here. This L should have probably been a little bit higher there. But we're going to use the distance formula to decide whether this is a rectangle or not. So first, we need to make sure that it's a parallelogram. So I'm going to check the opposite sides to make sure that those are equal. So our distance formula looks like this. So we have the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So let's check. Let's say JK up here first. So if I'm going to do the distance formula with JK, I have x1, y1, x2, y2, and I'm going to substitute those in. So I have 1 minus -2, and then 4 minus 3 squared. So this was JK. So this would give me 3 squared is 9, and this would give me 1, and 1 squared is 1, so this is the square root of 10. Okay, so hopefully we get the point of the distance formula. We did that first trimester, and we'll practice this some more. So I'm going to give you the answers for these so that we don't have to actually do it 6 times on this video. So ML is also the square root of 10. So then I would do the distance formula again for JM and KL. JM gives me the square root of 40, which we would simplify that. The square root of 40 breaks into root 4 and root 10, which would be 2 root 10. And then KL also gives me the square root of 40, so that's also 2 root 10. And then lastly, I would want to check the diagonals to make sure that those are equal, so that then we actually know it's a rectangle and not just a parallelogram. So if I did JL, if I did the distance formula there, gives me the square root of 50, which 50 breaks into root 25 and root 2. So that's 5 root 2. And then KM is also root 50. So since I have opposite sides congruent and I have diagonals congruent, that means that this is a rectangle. Okay, so for the U-Try problems here, you're using the information in the picture from example 1. So you're using the same information that we were given there. It says find the length of ML for one of them, and then find the value of X for those two things. Alright, so lastly, your joke. How do you cut the ocean in half? You use a seesaw. Okay, hope you have a great rest of your day, and make sure you're kind to someone today.